when people first start meditating, the most common problem that people will face is that they have all these thoughts. They wasn't aware of having all these thoughts because they're busy. But when you sit still, you suddenly become very aware of all of these thoughts. Then the next level will be the realization that, hang on a minute, most of these thoughts aren't even mine. They're almost like echoes or remnants of things that we've heard or picked up, and they just go on and on and on, like in a type of echo chamber. So
Mhm.
we have to be quite particular about almost um, seeing the silence of our mind and almost the purity of our essence as something that has to be valued, and that's something that we should value greater than just trying to fill our minds with this, that, and the other.
Yeah, at least the term for me, I mean, I haven't necessarily studied it in depth like other people have, but the term for me that comes up is super conscious. I don't know if that kind of is basically what you're describing too, is like having a super conscious activated. Because I mean, I definitely, when I've practiced silencing my mind and things like that, it's like almost like some kind of super conscious function starts to happen. And like you're like so crystally alert and awake that it's just like, yeah, you can see these thoughts or things from a mile away and or get answers quickly like that. And then when you don't have it on, it's kind of like, yeah, all the thoughts and everything, you get submerged into them. And then it's like you're almost drowning in a sense. But is that something that maybe you've term that you've used
Yeah,
or maybe looked into?
well, Mr. Gurdjieff, the way that he articulated it many times is he said that humans have two conscious minds. We're living in the wrong one at a lower level. So that was his kind of impartial critique of humanity. So we have two conscious minds. We're living in the wrong one at a lower level. And this is where it starts to become very interesting. So his idea that we have two conscious minds, I think he's referring to conscious subconscious. Or, and this is another clue, in his writings, All and Everything, the character will say what humans say it is, but it doesn't mean to say that's what it is. So he would say, as humans or people call it, the subconscious. So he's not saying it is the subconscious. He's saying that's what we call it and that's what we know it as. And many years of research, my conclusion is pretty much that we've been almost tricked into being in the wrong part of our mind at a lower level. Um, if you look at esoteric studies and even occultism, they would suggest historically humans haven't always had this conscious subconscious dichotomy. Probably connected to Atlantis when people were more highly evolved, or humans were more highly evolved. They didn't have this dichotomy between the conscious and subconscious. They had one mind, so they were able to access the greater aspect of their consciousness. So through the work that we actually practice in esoteric studies, it's almost like we're pulling back the veil of the subconscious and the conscious mind. So we get to access the the benefits of the one mind or the unconscious. Now, I also think this is also part of the control system that they want you kept in the conscious mind, which potentially could be the wrong mind at a lower level. When in actual fact, we could access all of the mind, which could also be connected to the collective consciousness as well. So we're living basically well under par. We're not reaching our potential. We're not maximizing our possibilities as a species. And it's almost like that is the trick. That is what has been done to us for one reason or another. Now we're living in a time where we don't even question the subconscious. We don't even investigate. We don't even look. Gurdjieff also said it's the equivalent of a man living in the basement of a mansion, and he doesn't even realize that he's living in a mansion, but just in the basement. Very similar to Plato's cave analogy.
Yeah. Well, so when you try to question your subconscious or whatever, like when you try to go into it, is that just simply self-observation? Is that simply what is it like to go
Well,
into those, you could say, mansions?
yeah, that would take us to this concept of thought incubation for problem solving. So we have problems on a day-to-day basis. Humans are designed to solve problems. I would say that that is the main purpose of humans, is to problem solve. If people don't almost celebrate their ability to problem solve, they're almost missing the whole point of the human experience. Animals, creatures can solve problems, but nowhere near on the same level that humans can. Now, because of this almost ignorance of this function of solving problems, it's been almost abandoned and left to a few people that either don't fully understand problem solving or end up creating the problem reaction solution where they get to control reality. And bearing in mind that if you look at the dream world is stories, it's tales, it's uh, parabolic, it's literally all about stories that we have in our mind. Okay, reality is no different. Whoever gets to control the story gets to control reality. So, over the last 3 years, there's been a particular, and I won't say certain words, there's been particular narratives, there's been particular stories or versions of what happened. Okay. Um, and because they're able to control and dominate the narrative, that has now become a reality. And in the history books, it will go down as a factual history. Okay. For me, I didn't allow it to be my story. Using the trichotomy of control, I placed my focus on the one third that I can control. I can control that story. And then I became aware of those trying to create another story that I could not control. The same with most of the problems in the world. I can't control those stories. You can watch the news and you can kind of make a decision as to what story you want to believe, but you can't control it. So I focus my energy, my time on the story that I want to happen. And then between my story and the story that I can't control, you get like that kind of third space where I've been able to influence, but not give up my version of reality. And if I'm honest, and I know there's quite a few people that are also experiencing the same that did similar things, they've they've actually come to a realization that over the last 3 years, where this kind of monstrosity of a story it was trying to take over our existence or our version of reality, either failed and they've actually done so well in the last few years when really they shouldn't have done anything. They should still be stuck in 2020. Now, whether this is to do with some kind of planetary or some kind of energetic alignment, where those who wanted to control our reality seized that moment because they had to, because it was um, a good time for some kind of change in reality on a planetary level, they've chosen that window of opportunity for a reason. So I said in around about 2021, well, actually, it'd be a good idea if we did the same. And I can say, hand on heart, that my reality has changed for the better.
Did you have like enough time to plan during that time? Was it like because at least for me during that time when the flu broke out or something, or the cold, um I mean, I was unemployed, so I had a lot of time to like, meditate. And
Mhm.
I mean, actually, during that time when I was meditating a lot, I didn't have any, I wasn't working. I mean, I started to like access super high states of consciousness just because I wasn't necessarily putting in some of my energy into, my job or whatever. So all my energy is just going into meditation. I started to like have super intense experiences.
Sure.
So I mean, that's what how I kind of spent my time. But it's like, I mean, for you, like, what did you spend your time doing? Was it planning? Did you still work, or did you? What kind of? How did you get yourself
Um,
ahead?
well, in 2020, I got hit hard. I lost my business. Okay. So everything I just said, you could say, well, you can disregard that because I got heavily affected by their story. Well, yeah, I did. But equally, and I've always used this as a maxim, whatever is created to hold me back is equally designed to push me forwards. So, yeah, I had a few days where I was very sad and upset about what was taking place. Um, while simultaneously, I was able to accumulate enough energy to say, hang on a minute, if if there's a time and if there's a window of opportunity for change, those that are in the know will know. So if they're making such big changes in this moment, that equally means that we can do the same. And once the penny dropped for that, I was then able to refocus using the trichotomy of control, refocus on what I can do. So I was able to use thought distillation. I was able to use problem solving. So any problem that I faced about a new business, new opportunities, how am I going to navigate my way around this world with all these restrictions? I would simply use a thought incubation after the distillation of the question, plant it um, just before I went to sleep. And when I woke up, I had very clear, precise answers and solutions to the questions that I was asking consistently. So I was able to implement those and literally change my reality. Even though there was another reality, I call it the they reality, were trying to impose on my reality. But my reality was actually strong enough to withstand it, not only withstand it, but almost be ignored by it in some strange way. It's almost like there's a reality over there, but it's not my reality, but it's okay. I can be in the world, but not of it. And I think that's the true meaning of that. It's being in the world and not of it. So you can have your own story. And at the end of the day, like nobody truly knows what is real and what's not real. And we could be in a dream right now. You know, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that everything is a dream. Now, I generally don't go 100% with that, but I do think, I do feel, I do sense the dreamlike nature of the waking state reality. And just to finish that bit off, I also think that reality is more fluid than we're led to believe.
Yeah, and then one thing that I mean, looking at Gurdjieff's work and also from my own personal experiences, meditating and stuff. Because some of the meditations I do, for example, were actually kind of linked to Gurdjieff, I would say. The person that I learned it from was they do somebody named Theodore Nottingham, which is he kind of
Oh
links
yeah,
Gurdjieff's work between. Did you know
yeah,
about him?
yeah, yeah,
Okay, yeah, so
yeah,
yeah, he links Gurdjieff's work between Orthodox Christianity and stuff like that. But
yeah,
one of the things that happens is that we're hypnotized by our senses, you could say, like our five senses. And so when you practice, certain kinds of meditation, when you realize like, your sense of sight, for example, is happening the same way that your lungs are breathing, like it's just happening automatically on its own. So when you kind of like observe that and realize you kind of, yeah, the sleepiness of it, then you can kind of put distance between your sense of sight and then your observer. And then that's when you become unhypnotized from your senses. And then when that does happen and you learn to like not identify with, the five senses and things like that, then that fluidity starts to happen. Um, and then you can kind of relate it to, the verse in the Bible where it's like, uh, if you want to enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to become like a child again. And
yeah,
what that means for me at least is just like, all the programming, all the conditioning that you had about what reality is, how to see things. For example, like your parents will tell me or tell you like, look over here, like listen to me. So you're kind of trained to like, okay, let me pay attention like that, or let me look this way, or so once you start to unlearn all these things and you start to become like a child again, then yeah, you start to access some kind of the kingdom of heaven or like some kind of ethereal space, which is like you know no words or anything can really describe.
yeah.
So I mean, I've always had that sense too, especially doing work on myself like that. So It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, you could say that the whole work for all esoteric studies is the integration of our functions, and so that we're no longer dysfunctional. So if we were normal, natural, fully functional, um, a lot of the problems wouldn't even be there. They wouldn't even exist in the first place, and then we wouldn't be snowed under with problems in the world and personal problems. We would actually have a lot more time and space to deal with particular problems that came up, and most of those problems can be rectified in the dream states or dream worlds. I just want to touch upon something because you mentioned about the senses. So, and this was mentioned in the film Inception. So when they spoke about the kick or the unbalancing as being a technique, okay, that would actually be the description of the sixth sense. Okay, so we're educated to believe or to think that we only have five senses. Okay, but I'm sure I looked on Wikipedia maybe a year ago and it actually listed seven. But we're educated to only trust the five senses. Okay, and the sixth sense is the vestibular system, which is connected to our balance. Okay, so when we're in homeostasis, when we're in the parasympathetic, when we're not suffering from dis-ease or chronic tension or involuntary tension, we then have the ability, once our five senses start to integrate, it then activates and opens up the sixth sense or the seventh sense. And that would be the sense of balance, movement, and also attention, or paying attention to our balance and movement. Now, and think about this, right? We use the sixth sense all the time, but we're just not conscious of it. So when we're walking, when we're running, when we're riding a bicycle, when we're skateboarding, when we're surfing, you generally know um, how to balance. Okay, but what is that sense? It's not one of the five senses. It's the sixth sense, and I don't think it was a coincidence that they used the sixth sense as a technique for the kick in the film Inception. Okay, so you would know if you were upside down. You know if you was laying sideways. You know many different things. The same way, the body when it's asleep, it knows when it's laying horizontally, when it's in a prone position. Okay, so that means that the sixth sense is available, and it's very common that people wake up because they suddenly feel like the sensation of falling, yeah, or slipping over, which we've already mentioned. Now, you can actually train that technique, and that technique is largely trained in martial arts for balance purposes, but it can actually be extended. So if we're able to be conscious of that sensation of balance and the attention to our balance, and this is where I strongly believe that Gurdjieff's movements, it's heavily connected to the sort of asystematic movements, where the left and the right hemispheres are doing different things simultaneously, and the acute attention and awareness to that. I think that's heavily linked to this sixth sense. So I'll get to the point. If we can develop the sixth sense and even the seventh sense, and I suspect there's way more senses than that, it gives us a greater potential and possibility for our existence, especially in the dream world. And this is also connected to why we have sensations of floating or flying and things like that. That would be the sixth sense.
And then, wait, what's the seventh? What would be the seventh one? Or at least, what do you think it is?
Spatial prediction or proprioception.
Oh, okay.
Now, if you look at modern sports and therapies, they already now talk about proprioception. So those senses have been dismissed for many, many years. We're educated to think or believe we have five senses. That creates a massive limitation. Yeah, of course, we use proprioception all the time in order for me to pick up this cup. I'm using my sixth and seventh sense. But because of my education system, I wouldn't go any deeper into it. And if you look at a lot of the esoteric exercises and studies and the areas of interest, it's predominantly in those sixth and seventh senses because they've been so heavily neglected over time. And we need to go deeper into those. And think about this. If we're talking about the sixth and seventh senses of the vestibular system and proprioception, which is connected to balance, spatial prediction, intuition, and all these things, that is actually the dream world for the most part. And this is why it can feel or appear to be very uncanny, because we're trying to perceive the dream-like nature of those worlds, the nebulous worlds and the fluid worlds, from the five senses. And those five senses probably can't compute them well enough. But when you factor in or bring it in to play the sixth and seventh senses along with the five senses, then that gives you a greater possibility for the extraction of that data, knowledge, or download.
I also think there's an importance with magnetism when it comes to dreams. Like this entire sleep process, for example, too. I think some form of magnetism opens or happens. Like, for example, like when you start to fall asleep, I think you get pulled in a certain, like, I think you get pulled into the heart and you get pulled into different, you know, uh, realities and things like that. And you keep getting pulled, or, I mean, different stuff like that can happen. I mean, do you think magnetism plays a part in like dreams or anything? Do you think like there's some kind of magnetic or force that is either pulling you to dream and also that you use to operate in the dream?
Yeah, well, if we work on the assertion that the mind or the intellect is electric and the heart or the emotions is magnetism, then from that perspective, then yeah, definitely. Um, and also, even in our language that we use, so we say that we fall asleep. So it's like there's this notion of falling. Gurdjieff talks about the law of falling, which, without getting too much into the physics of, say, push and pull, I've actually been kicked off of some podcasts for bringing up the subject of push and pull. I probably won't mention it, although I've
I
got a short.
wouldn't. I'm open minded, so I don't kick people off like that.
No. Okay. Well, technically, there is no that there is only the push force. There is no pull force. Okay. Now, this kind of glitches most people when they hear that because they've been so indoctrinated to believe that push and pull are equal forces. There is only, and this is almost like the greatest occult esoteric secret, that once you get the gist of this, it opens up a whole new world or reality for you. Hence, a lot of people who are heavily programmed will take this badly. This is bad news to them because they like to believe in this dualistic nature of push and pull forces are equal. Okay, now the action, yeah, there's a pull-in action, but there's no pull force. The easiest way to describe it. So if you walk up to a door that is opening to the inside, yeah, not the outside, you have a handle. Okay, you have to have a handle. Why? Because there's no pull force. So you have to take hold of the handle and push it from behind. You're pushing the handle from behind to create a pull action. If there was such a thing, or if we could use the pull force, it means that you could walk up to a door, up to a glass on the table, and put your hand out and draw the object to you. But you can't. In order for this glass, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, in order for this glass to get closer to me, I have to either have a handle or push it from behind. There is no mechanism that I can pull this object to me unless I use telekinesis. I don't know if that made sense.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know if you read this book called Reality Transurfing, but they kind of break it down pretty well. I mean, it basically talks about there's inner intention and there's outer intention. So inner
Yeah.
intention is like your ability to do. So like if I were to say, for example, go do 100 push-ups or something, I have to push myself to do it. Whereas outer intentions, again, being drawn towards it. And so the kind of like the mind and the soul operates based off of outer intention versus inner intention, which is like, um, I forgot how he describes it, but basically, yeah, it's just your ability to do something like that. So he talks about basically, I mean, in the book, he kind of goes over how a lot of people from old, like Atlantis, things like that, had mastered an outer intention, which is
Yeah.
the ability to have. So, like, for example, you talked about the cup right there. If you want to have that cup and pull it towards you, you know, or you would
Yeah.
use outer intention. But if you want to, like, the ability to do and like move it around or whatever, I mean, it's not necessarily yours if you can't pull it towards you in a sense. That makes sense. But
Yeah. Well, years ago, I used to have dreams that I was, and this is when I was a child. I used to have dreams that I was sat at a desk, almost like in a school, and I was being taught telekinesis. So I had to sit at this desk and I had to move objects. And there was a teacher there, and it always used to mystify me as a child, but that I had this dream. But it was always connected to this whole idea or the physics of push and pull, which is telekinesis. So it's the ability to move something without touching it. Yeah, even to push it away from you or to magnetize it towards you. Now, in a dream, there would be nothing to prevent you from using those the magnetism other than your own limitations of your own mind or your own beliefs. Yeah. So I think a lot of the dream world in terms of problem solving is actually connected to teach us certain even laws of physics and metaphysics. So like the ability to fly. I remember having a dream and I suddenly became lucid and I was walking down the street and there was somebody walking next to me and I started talking to him. And I said, "You do realize we're in a dream and we can fly?" And he looked at me as if to say, like, "Are you crazy?" So then I literally, through a type of relaxation, I was able to levitate up onto the rooftops. And then I was able to fly from one rooftop to another with this person watching me. Now, who this person was, I'm not sure. It could have been another aspect of myself. It could have been somebody that I projected into the dream. But the point is this. When I woke up, I was left with a sensation that we have way more potential and possibilities, and that um, most of our limitations are because of self-limitations, especially when it comes to the creative aspect of our existence.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I also had dreams like that too. It's kind of funny. Or telekinesis and like levitation. Like the levitation was actually quite interesting because it kind of left me with the same feeling that you had. But like basically in that dream, I was in a classroom as well, and then there's like this teacher. I think it was like a lady or something, but everyone was at a desk or something. And it's kind of like the dream kind of just then focused on me, like kind of people were kind of tuned out. And I was at my desk, and all of a sudden like I got pushed back, like almost as if yeah someone like pushed me back, and then like I saw a grid or something, like a grid layout, and then I was intuitively I knew that was like the grid layout of gravity or something, and then as soon as like I shifted out of that grid layer, then I was like able to levitate because I kind of transcended that in a sense layer of reality or something, and it's
Yeah.
kind of like teaching me how to levitate. But I mean, it's kind of
Well, I think so. As an example, and something we have to really factor in, and this I'll go back to stories, tales, and the parabolic nature of analogies or allegories. Okay, so if you have a dream where you experience like a conscious uh, levitation or the ability to fly or something that you would ordinarily say supernatural, when you wake up and you're left with a sensation of, wow, I was able to go past my ordinary possibilities and capabilities, it wouldn't necessarily mean to say that you can fly in this reality. It's more of a message or a code to tell you um, that you have the ability to do way more than you're currently doing in your ordinary being existence. Yeah.
yeah,
So it's
definitely.
important. Yeah. So you may not get a direct when it comes to the extraction of answers or solutions to problems that we've asked the question for, we may not get necessarily a direct answer. It could be encoded, it could be almost parabolic in nature. But we do get to experience it in terms of our senses, especially the sixth and seventh sense, because we get spatial prediction in the seventh sense, which means you're able to potentially predict a threat, hazard, or danger in the future, but not from the perspective of worry or anxiety about the unknown. So when we come back into our waking state or waking sleep state or our ordinary reality, even though we may not have had the direct answer, we may get the answer in terms of a sensation, as long as we can remember that sensation. And I think it's important not just to kind of write down, I don't know, I saw a horse flying and the horse was chestnut brown, so that means I have to look out for a horse. And no, it may not be that at all. We need to learn to be able to translate the parabolic nature of analogies and stories. And that can only come through the practice of self-observation, self-remembering, and paying attention to the detail of our existence.
And it kind of goes back to like our episode 2 where we talked about impressions, like using impressions as food. Is that kind of what it is, where like as soon as you're left with impression after a dream, kind of use it to make yourself stronger or better than you were last time?
Yeah, well, ordinarily, due to the kind of low level of self-consciousness or self-observation, self-awareness, we may be left with a kind of the remnants of a dream sensation that kind of doesn't make any sense. But that will normally just be due to the kind of level of our self-awareness. And it may not make sense straight away, but it might make sense tomorrow, next week. The other thing to factor in is that we may actually have a series of dreams. Maybe the problem is too big. The problem has to be broken down into like subversions of the problem. So we have like micro dreams of that, but it's still connected to the problem that we've asked to be solved. So it does become like a craft. It becomes like not a hobby, but it's something that you have to be interested in. It's something that you have to pay attention to. You have to invest in it. You have to pay attention. So we have to pay. It's not necessarily for free in order for us to get the answer, but it's something we can work on. And I always encourage students when I bring these subjects up. And it was actually Mr. Gurdjieff. He said that it's useful to carry aims that are small enough to put in your pocket. So rather than having like an aim or like a question of like, how can I fix the whole world of all the problems? That's too much of a big question. You're never going to get the answer for that. So we have to go through this process of distillation and redistillation of that question. So, and I'm going to say this just for practical terms, for anybody that's listening that might be interested in this or curious at least. So we need to, in terms of self-observation, we need to break our lives down in terms of, okay, I'm going to have 12 categories of my existence. It could be any number. You could break it down to 5, but let's say 12. What are the categories of my existence? Well, they're going to be very similar to everybody else's. You need money. You need somewhere to live, health, relationships. Basically, all the things that people would generally ask a psychic if they wanted an answer for. Yeah, there's a lot of commonalities in the questions that people ask psychics. It's generally about money, health, love, and future work or where they're going to live. And then so you break your existence down into those, and then you just take one of those subjects. So, for instance, if we took, I don't know, occupation, take that subject of occupation, and then we're going to distill that even more. So what about my occupation do I really need to know about? And out of that, you may break it down again. It could be another 12 times. Anyway, you go through this process of mind mapping and distillation until you get to a point where you have complete clarity of the question. And even Gurdjieff, he used to talk about, like, the problem is that we don't have the language, we don't understand. If there's 10 people in a room and you show them the same thing, they'll come up with different answers. Okay, so when we go through this process of distillation of the question, we want that question to end up being as pure as we can. Then we have a possibility of getting a direct answer for that question. When anybody says, oh, I don't get any answers to my problems, it's probably because you're not asking the right question.
So there's a sweet spot to get an answer to a question, like a certain way to impress your mind or whatever, to where it'll give you an answer.
Yeah, and it's not as mysterious as we kind of might think it is. I mean, if I asked you right now, how do we solve the problem of war in a certain place? It's a big question.
Yeah.
It's going to
Is
be
that rhetorical? You're asking me?
Sorry?
Is that rhetorical, or you're actually asking me?
No, it's rhetorical.
Okay, I was like, I don't know.
But it's a big question. But if I said something like, I've got a glass of water here, I'm thirsty, what should I do? You could probably answer that. Drink the water.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have to factor in scale when it comes to problems. Anyway, if you're new to this sort of thing and you want to break away from having to ask somebody else, ask this, that, read a book, go to a consultant, pay loads of money for whatever, practice. Start using thought incubation. Start asking your dream world to start solving problems for you. Now, I strongly recommend that you don't take a very important question to start with. Like a life and death question. I wouldn't start on that level. I would start on very simple. Yeah, these are functions that have been laid dormant for probably the majority of our adult existence. So we have to be gentle. We have to go easy on ourselves. So we can start with very, very small, simple questions, and also questions there that we can decipher or distinguish whether we got an answer or not. So we avoid like complexities. We keep it simple. You can even do some experiments. You can have a bit of fun with experiments. You could almost do like a blind or double blind experiments where you could put something in a box that you don't know and see if you can extract what it is in the box. So you cross it over into the realms of like remote viewing, things like that. It's a fascinating and interesting, but most of all, a very practical way of accessing information and data.
Final question here. It's very good information. But yeah, final question. What is one thing that you would like to dream?
One thing that I would like to dream. At this moment in time, probably world peace. If we could experience, yeah, or at least a heavy reduction of conflict on a day-to-day level, on the micro and the macro. I think, yeah. And also, I was going to say something before you said to finish off on.
Mhm.
When you really distillate everything that we're talking about, and this includes the esoteric, the occult, dream hacking, and all these things, most of it comes down to one thing, and it's relaxation. Yeah, the ability to consciously relax. So I'm saying this after the question that you asked me, because world peace it would actually be like the whole world got a day off. The whole world got an opportunity to actually relax, to actually go into the parasympathetic homeostasis. If the whole world could do that, like an official day off where we could all be relaxed, we would literally see this whole world, our whole reality would transform right before our eyes, our senses, all 7 of them. So yeah.
So let's start a petition to a day of relaxation. But
Could be
yeah.
worth a pop. I mean, if things get much worse, then we might have to try every possible way to do things. But yeah, I mean that would be my advice to anybody that's watching this podcast, listening to it, and in the future is. And this is what is really being hidden from us. This is what is really being occulted. I wouldn't worry too much about all this kind of magical, mysterious stuff. Start to look at the more functional, practical aspects of what is being hidden from your own existence and your freedom. The freedom to go from one system into another, and then only return to the system of the sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, and freeze when it's useful or when you need to. And you can consciously leave that system and return to normality. And just that alone will start to solve a lot of problems, because most of the problems are either manifestations or emanations or projections of our unconscious tension.
There's some wise words to end on. So thank you for coming on. And I'll link all of Lee's stuff at the beginning of the video as well as in the description, so you guys can go check out his channel and what he's doing. Very potent, powerful information. So yeah, thank you for coming on once again.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Ezekiel. It's always a pleasure coming on your platform, and and I hope and I sincerely hope that people that watch this podcast can get something useful from this. I don't want to promote kind of useless, mystical, magical things. I'm really big into practical applications of magical and mystical things, but the practical application of it on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
Thank you.